Welcome back to Dark Deeds and Conspiracy, the show where we dig into the facts, the fiction, and everything in between. I'm Jordan, your resident question asker, red string theorist, and enthusiast for all things they don't want you to know.
And I'm Alex, your friendly neighborhood skeptic, here to keep Jordan from turning every loose thread into a shadow government plot. I believe in evidence, not vibes.
We'll see about that today, because in this episode, we're diving into one of the most controversial and suspicious deaths in the past decade: Jeffrey Epstein.
Financier, convicted sex offender, friend of the ultra-powerful, and, as the official story goes, a man who died by suicide in a federal prison in 2019, while under constant surveillance, on suicide watch, in one of the most high-profile criminal cases in the world.
Until the cameras mysteriously malfunctioned, his guards fell asleep, and his cellmate was transferred just hours before. Yeah, I'm not buying the oopsie daisy narrative.
And here we go. Jordan has her tinfoil hat on.
It's aluminum foil, Alex. It reflects the truth.
Right. Look, today we're gonna lay it all out. What we know, what we don't, the official findings, red flags, the theories that have fueled everything from memes to congressional concern.
And by the end, you'll either be saying case closed, like Alex, or wondering just how many coincidences it takes to start looking like a cover up.
Or you'll be somewhere in the middle, which, honestly, is where most people should be.
So grab your flashlight, we're heading down the rabbit hole.
Before we jump into the death and the theories surrounding it, let's set the stage. Because Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just some Wall Street guy who ended up in jail. His story is layered.
Layered like an onion, or a really well funded lie.
Here we go. So, quick facts. Epstein was born in 1953 in Brooklyn. He started out as a high school math teacher, actually, despite not having a college degree. From there, he somehow landed a job at Bear Stearns, a major investment bank.
That somehow being a theme that follows him throughout his entire career. No degree, no certifications, and yet he kept getting access, power, and connections. That's red flag number one for me.
Well, to be fair, the 80s on Wall Street were kind of the Wild West. Epstein eventually built his own firm, Epstein & Company, managing money exclusively for billionaires. One of his known clients was Leslie Wexner, the billionaire behind Victoria's Secret, and that relationship gave Epstein a lot of money. And a mansion in Manhattan.
The biggest private residence in Manhattan, by the way, just casually gifted to him. Totally normal.
Okay, that is weird. No argument there.
And that's when he starts building his social network that reads like a who's who of power and influence. We're talking Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, Naomi Campbell, Elon Musk. The list goes on.
Let's be clear though. Being in the same room as someone doesn't mean they're part of his crimes.
No, but it does mean they might not have wanted him to talk.
Let's stay on track. In 2005, a 14-year-old girl reported Epstein to the police in Palm Beach. That led to an investigation and, eventually, a very controversial plea deal in 2008.
This part's huge. Epstein was facing serious charges: underage trafficking, multiple victims, and instead of going to trial, he struck a deal with the U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta. He pled guilty to two lesser charges, got 13 months in jail, and was allowed work release 6 days a week.
Right, he was literally leaving jail during the day and going back at night. And that deal also gave immunity to any potential co-conspirators. That part has raised a lot of eyebrows.
They should raise pitchforks. That deal was done behind closed doors, the victims were informed, and the whole thing stinks.
Fast forward to 2019, investigative journalism and public pressure bring renewed attention to the case. Epstein is arrested again, this time by federal authorities in New York, and charged with sex trafficking of minors across state lines.
And this time, the public was watching. People were asking questions. The media was finally paying attention.
He was denied bail, and sent to the Metropolitan Correctional Center, MCC, in Manhattan. While awaiting trial, prosecutors said the evidence against him was, quote, overwhelming, end quote, and more victims were coming forward.
And then, on August 10th, 2019, less than a month after his arrest, Jeffrey Epstein was found unalived in his cell.
Official cause, suicide by hanging.
Unofficial cause, let's talk about it.
So let's walk through what the public was told, the official version of what happened the night Jeffrey Epstein died.
Allegedly died.
According to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, on the night of August 9th, 2019, Epstein was in his cell at MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. He was supposed to be checked on every 30 minutes. But
The two guards assigned to him that night, conveniently, fell asleep on the job for about 3 hours.
yes, and during that window, Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell around 6:30 a.m. on August 10th. Emergency services were called, and he was pronounced dead about an hour later at the hospital.
Now let's talk about the cameras.
Yeah, that's where it gets bad. The cameras outside Epstein's cell malfunctioned. Some footage was corrupted, and the backup system also failed.
This is a federal prison for one of the most high profile inmates in the country. And all the cameras just happened to stop working that night? Come on.
To be fair, the MCC had been criticized for poor conditions long before this. Understaffed, outdated infrastructure, long hours for guards. There were problems.
Right. But now it's not just incompetence, it's incompetence at the exact right moment. Add to the fact that Epstein's cellmate had been transferred the day before, leaving him alone.
And remember, Epstein had already reportedly attempted suicide once, just a few weeks earlier. He had been placed on suicide watch.
Which makes the next part insane. After just a few days, they took him off suicide watch and then put him in a regular cell with less supervision.
And the Bureau of Prisons said he was evaluated and no longer considered a threat to himself.
By who? The same people who didn't even keep him alive for trial?
Look, I'll admit, even for someone who trusts the system more than you do, Jordan, this doesn't look good. The negligence is real. The paperwork was falsified. The protocols weren't followed.
And that's what makes the official story hard to swallow. The guards fell asleep. The cameras failed. The cellmate's gone. The suicide watch was lifted. The autopsy was inconclusive. There are too many failures all at once.
To be accurate, the New York City medical examiner ruled it a suicide. But, and this is important, the Epstein family hired their own pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who said the injuries were more consistent with homicide.
Exactly. Baden said the hyoid bone in Epstein's neck was broken in a way that's more typical of strangulation, not suicide by hanging.
But that's not definitive. Hyoid breaks can happen in hangings, especially in older individuals.
Sure, but paired with everything else, it starts to look less like bad luck and more like something darker.
Yeah. This is why Epstein didn't kill himself became a meme overnight. People just don't believe the story adds up.
It's not just internet trolls. There are politicians, journalists, even members of the intelligence community who've said publicly that something feels off.
All right, so that's the official version, plus a few cracks in her.
And now we're going full tinfoil because there are a lot of theories about who might have wanted Epstein silenced and why. So now that we've walked through the so-called official story, let's talk about what everyone's really thinking. Who had something to lose if Epstein talked?
And here we are.
Look, you don't have to be wearing a foil hat to say that this smells wrong. Epstein had dirt, real dirt, on some of the most powerful people in the world. People who had been to his island, people listed in his flight logs, people whose reputations would be obliterated if all those details came out in court.
That's assuming he would have talked. Epstein had beaten the system once. Maybe he thought he could cut another deal.
Maybe, or maybe he was ready to cooperate. There were reports that he was naming names. The FBI had raided his island, found videos, photos, hard drives. The walls were closing in. He dies, and suddenly, poof! No trial, no testimony, no courtroom bombshells.
Okay, so let's lay out the major theories.
Okay, so this is the big one. Theory number one, he was murdered to protect the powerful. Epstein was a liability. He had leverage, he had secrets. Some believe powerful figures, politicians, royalty, business moguls, arranged for him to be silenced. We're talking about people with motive, money, and connections.
It's not impossible, but it would require a lot of people to be either in on it or conveniently fail at their jobs.
You're saying that like it didn't happen.
I'm saying it's hard to prove. If you want to name names, Clinton, Trump, Prince Andrew, yes, they were all connected to him. But there's a difference between this looks shady and this person ordered a hit inside a federal prison.
Sure, but remember, this isn't just about one person pulling strings. It's about a system that protects itself, institutions looking the other way. You don't need an assassin, just enough silence.
Okay, this one's wild. Theory number two is intelligence agency involvement.
Wild or plausible? Some researchers, including former spies, have suggested that Epstein may have worked with intelligence agencies, possibly as a blackmail asset.
So you're saying Epstein was gathering dirt on high-profile individuals on purpose.
Think about it. He invited the world's elite to his homes, his island, his plane, all allegedly wired with surveillance. If he was running a blackmail operation, whether for himself or others, that's a gold mine.
Still not proven. The CIA, Mossad, MI6. These are names people throw around without evidence. We have no confirmed link.
We have a guy with no traditional background who suddenly has billions connected to global leaders and almost total legal immunity until it all collapses. That's not normal.
Okay, now we're into tinfoil territory. Theory 3 is that Epstein is still alive.
Listen, I'm just presenting what's out there. Some believe Epstein faked his death and was extracted, maybe by allies, maybe as part of the deal. They point to inconsistencies in the body photos, the rushed autopsy, the secrecy.
Let's be real. The body was identified. Multiple reports confirmed his death.
Still, you gotta admit, no public funeral, sealed records, the bizarre gaps in the timeline, it feeds the theory, especially in the case already riddled with failure.
Let's talk about some of the details that actually are suspicious, regardless of theories.
Thank you. Let's start with the broken bones in his neck. Dr. Baden said it's more consistent with strangulation. The official autopsy disagreed, but the disagreement itself is a red flag.
There's also the falsified logs. The guards lied about checking on him. They later admitted they were sleeping or browsing online.
And they were offered plea deals instead of facing trial. Convenient, no? We never got to hear them answer hard questions under oath.
Plus, the cell itself was cleared immediately. No preservation of the scene. Like they were in a hurry to just move on.
All of this adds up to something we should question. You don't have to buy every theory, but pretending everything about this case was normal, that's delusional.
All right, deep breaths. That's a lot to process. Let's talk about the public reaction and media coverage. Ask whether we'll ever get real answers and what the Epstein case means for public trust.
Spoiler, we won't. But we'll talk about why that matters anyway.
Okay, so let's talk about what happened after August 10th, when the news broke, because what followed was one of the strangest, fastest growing media firestorms in recent memory.
It's like the floodgates opened. People didn't even hesitate. Within hours, Epstein didn't kill himself was everywhere.
It wasn't just online trolls either. It became a bipartisan talking point for conspiracy theorists and average Americans. Even celebrities were tweeting it. Politicians dodged questions. Memes exploded.
Let's be honest, the memes carried the torch harder than any reporter. I saw it spray painted on overpasses, t-shirts, it even popped up during live interviews.
Remember the guy on Fox News? Mid-interview, dead serious, then boom. Epstein didn't kill himself. Live TV.
Ah, that was mwah.
But on the journalism side, coverage was cautious. Major outlets reported on the death, the official findings, the timeline, but few dug too deep into why so many people didn't believe it.
But that's what got people suspicious. You had this massive story, potential political implications, connections to global elites, and suddenly it went quiet, almost like it was being buried.
Some outlets did follow up, the New York Times and Miami Herald, a few documentaries, but compared to the scope of the case, most coverage just echoed the official line.
Well, let's not forget the Project Veritas leak. That clip of the ABC News anchor Amy Robach caught on a hot mic saying they had everything years earlier, but the story was killed.
Yeah, she said they had interviews, photos, and that Buckingham Palace pressured the network to shut it down.
That alone should have been a bigger scandal. It confirmed what people already suspected, that the media didn't just miss the story, they may have protected people.
So why didn't people believe the official story, even those who usually trust institutions?
Because for once, it was just too much to chalk up to coincidence. People don't like being lied to. They see the double standards, the lack of accountability, the protection of the rich. It confirms something people already felt deep down, that there are rules for us and no rules for them.
You're not wrong. Epstein's death became a symbol, not just of injustice, but of how power operates in the shadows. It wasn't just he didn't kill himself, it was, they'll never let the truth come out.
And that's why it stuck. The memes weren't just jokes, they were resistance. People's way of saying, we see through this BS.
So here we are, almost 6 years later. And for all the headlines, outrage, speculation, what's really changed?
Let's be honest, not much. Epstein's dead. The public never got a full trial. Names weren't named. Secrets stayed secrets. If justice was supposed to come, it never really showed up.
There were some ripple effects, though. Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested in 2020, tried and convicted. She's serving 20 years. Some of Epstein's victims finally got to testify, to be heard.
Sure, but even that cell sanitized. Her trial wasn't televised. Her client list never saw daylight. People wanted answers, but what we got felt like damage control.
The DOJ opened investigations. There were Senate hearings, promises of reform at the Bureau of Prisons. But if you ask most people, they'll tell you the system protected itself. Again.
Okay, but let's not forget the surveillance footage was lost from both outside Epstein's cell and other key areas. No one was ever held accountable in a meaningful way. Not the prison staff, not the people who helped him exploit minors, not the people who enabled him for years. And that black book, the one with hundreds of names, still sealed.
It's like the story just faded out, quietly, as if that was the goal all along. So what do we take away from this? What did Epstein's death actually reveal?
That power doesn't just corrupt, it insulates. Epstein's life and death expose a network of money, influence, and silence. And even when that network breaks, it somehow still wins.
It also reminded people that justice isn't always automatic, especially when the accused has friends in very high places.
This case has become a cultural scar. That Epstein didn't kill himself meme is not just a punchline, it's a symbol, a shorthand for we know something's wrong.
And it keeps coming back up because nothing has changed. That's the real tragedy. So that's it for today's episode. Epstein's death may be a closed case on paper, but in the court of public opinion, it is far from over.
So whether you believe he was murdered, vanished, or just a victim of a stunning series of screw-ups, one thing's clear. The truth still hasn't been told.
And maybe it never will be, but that doesn't mean we stop asking questions.
Or watching the watchers.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you have your own theories, thoughts, or deep dives, head us up in the comments or leave us a review wherever you're tuning in.
We'll be back next week with a new mystery, a fresh debate, and more uncomfortable questions.
Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical.
And stay loud.